Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. It gives us great pleasure to welcome the Smithsonian Institute to host this next session. And to be the moderator of that session, please welcome Dr. Anna Spalding, who's the director of the Adrienne Arsht Community-Based Resilience Solutions Initiative at the Smithsonian Institute. Anna.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Interesting format here. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much. As I mentioned, my name is Anna Spalding, and I'm the director of a new initiative at the Smithsonian. It's called the Adrienne Arsht Community-Based Resilience Solutions Initiative. And the goal of the initiative is to, our main theme is adaptation as a pathway to resilience. And so by adaptation, we mean the different strategies that both nature and people use to adapt to changing ocean conditions. So our focus is on understanding the drivers of change, understanding the strategies both nature and humans, so human societies, use to adapt. And so those strategies are those policy pathways, those different interventions we can do to support adaptation. And then the desired outcomes is the third piece of what we're trying to understand. And by desired outcomes, I mean trying to really understand what it is that coastal communities want and need in order to be more resilient, as opposed to imposing some of those ways of how we believe communities should be more resilient. And so the session today, the goal of the session today is to present and discuss examples of those pathways to resilience. So we have a fantastic panel today. We have 5 panelists, and the session is organized around 3 different themes, if you will. So one theme is we're focusing on diverse perspectives. So what are some examples of community-based actions in the region, right? Thinking local-focused region, local ways of adapting. Our second section is on science. We need, obviously, strong science in order to inform these decisions. And our third section is on business interactions and how we can facilitate businesses in order to support resilience in place. So that's sort of a more structural piece in terms of how we support these changes. The Resilience Initiative, I also want to point out, is part of a bigger effort, Life on a Sustainable Planet, which is an effort at the Smithsonian, thinking about how we change the science and how we engage with partners and make sure that we do policy-relevant, use-inspired research that's interdisciplinary, centered in equity, and focusing on the communities that need this the most. I'm going to say one last thing before we introduce our panelists. And that's that the focus of the center and these partnerships that we're building, right? So this session is we have different partners. We have WorldFish, CGAIR, the World Economic Forum, Stanford Center for Ocean Solutions, and Ocean Nexus, who are not represented here personally or physically. And while we do work all over the world, we want to focus on the global tropics as a region where we identify communities as being highly vulnerable, but also as a place where there's a lot of potential for leadership, and how we leverage and how we potentialize that leadership is really important. So what we're trying to do is move the narrative from tropical crisis to a tropical opportunity. And for that, we have the absolute best panel to do that. So I'm going to invite the panelists to sit up here, if they can. And as an introduction, I'm going to, and you can sit in, there's no particular order. I'll direct questions at you as needed. I feel kind of behind everyone here, but that's okay. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to say their name and their affiliation before we begin into the program. So, Romana.
Hello. So hello everyone, very good morning, and I'm Pirzadi Romana Hussain, working as a climate research scientist at WorldFish. Thank you.
Good morning everyone, my name is Coral Pasisi. I'm from the South Pacific, from the smallest country in the world called Niue. You can Google it to find out where it is. I'm also the Director of Climate Change for the Pacific region. But I support a non-profit organization who's focused on oceans and climate change, resilience development, and I'll speak today about an initiative that we're doing in UAE. Thank you.
Good morning, I am Bosco Juma. I come from Kenya. I am a marine conservationist and a director of a community-based organization known as Big Ship. We work mostly with the adjacent forest community in supporting sustainable livelihood and conserving the mangrove ecosystem. I'm happy to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Joshina. I'm a social ecologist from the Stanford Center for Ocean Solutions. I'm also from Mauritius, a small island nation in the Indian Ocean, so I always wear my tropical hat. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Alfredo Giron. I am the head of the Ocean Action Agenda at the World Economic Forum. I am originally from Mexico. Most of my work has been in the tropics as well, particularly with fishing communities, and now trying to bring this perspective into the forum's machinery. Very happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you. And we do have some opening, well, there were going to be some opening remarks, but we have some remarks coming from the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, but she's a little bit behind, so we're going to get started with our panel. So, as I said, we have three different sections, and the first one is on diverse perspectives. And so I've asked Bosco and Coral to present some thinking around how we ground marine and coastal governance in the local context, with obviously a broader benefit. We recognize that the tropical majority holds a unique position to drive this evidence-based and context-specific solutions to the complex challenges of climate change. So by empowering these voices, by providing opportunities for the communities across the global tropics, we can foster thriving coastal communities and really center that leadership, right? So the core vision of this sort of engaging the tropical majority piece is centered around four main actions, thinking about how we center equity in ocean governance, how we reconnect people and nature. And by reconnect, we mean legally through access, through land tenure, through things that provide those rights and guarantee those rights to people in place. Redefining ocean literacy, which is another really important piece when we think about how we define the ocean, how we think about the ocean. We often think about, the ecological descriptions of ocean processes. So can we include ideas such as voyaging or other cultural connections as core parts of that ocean literacy? And then the third piece is really changing how we do science, so decolonizing it and really providing opportunities for experts from from across the global tropics to be able to be the leaders in this space. So my first question is for Coral. I'm sorry, I'm behind you. I was wondering if you could share some of the things you're doing with your local communities to support resilience of nature, of the ocean, and people. And while you say it's a small country, it's a big ocean that, that you have space over. So how does your particular role allow you to do these sorts of activities? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the question and for the invitation. So yes, Niue is a small island developing state, but it's in the heart of the blue Pacific continent. And so our exclusive economic zone, and therefore the space on Earth or the ocean that we have custodianship over is very large. And our country and community have agreed to lock away 40% of that. That is the largest per exclusive economic zone and territorial waters in the world. And so that's a really big part of our natural real estate that is now locked up and protected for at least 20 years, but hopefully in perpetuity. So I think one of the important things about the Pacific to know is that we're a very young Western system of legal governance space. We have thousands of years of traditional knowledge and tenure over our ocean and land, and our oldest country in the Pacific so far as a democratically elected government is 60 years, and our youngest is 24. So we still have very strong traditional tenure and knowledge that governs the way that we manage our natural resources. And our laws and our science is actually probably less able to manage that effectively than our traditional systems. And so our traditional people, which is the vast majority of the population, are a core part of making decisions over those resources. And their knowledge is particularly important to inform our decisions. So this is really important when we look at valuing what protected ocean actually means. What kind of outcomes are important across that space? What are the value drivers that this protected ocean contributes not just to our community, our country, our region, and actually global stability? And that's where we have looked at those dimensions of value and broken up into 5 sort of key areas. So it's not just carbon, it's not just fish, it's not just whales or whatever interests and international stakeholder, that ocean has a lot of value. Traditional practice, food security, climate action, climate resilience, mitigation and absorption of carbon dioxide, as well as biodiversity uplift. And until we really truly value what that means, we don't appreciate the importance of protecting it for long enough to continue to pump those outcomes out for everyone, right? And as the global environment is deteriorating, and we're on a 3-degree pathway now, those areas of pristine ocean become even more valuable into the future. So we need to start valuing that in a way that translates to the resources, to the communities that manage that effectively. So that protection doesn't come as a burden, as a lost opportunity for them for fish. We need to flip that coin around, and that's essentially what we've done in WHOI. We've created a fair financing instrument that costs how much it costs for that country to protect that space, what it's going to cost us to build the next generation of Niuean children so that they become the owners of that asset into the future. They can build sustainable blue businesses around that to protect it forever. And that cost we've divided across the entire protected area and spliced it into square kilometers. And we started calling that an ocean conservation credit, to sell it and raise the capital to reinvest in that protection for the long term. Of course, the regulatory markets are very nervous around nature credits at this point in time. So we've had to turn that into an ocean conservation commitment. But essentially, anyone in the world can sponsor 1 square kilometer of ocean in the Moana Mahu area, which is our large-scale marine protected area. And that will guarantee the protection of that square kilometer of ocean for 20 years, with the proceeds going to train our children to be the scientists that manage the coral reef systems, count the fish, create the sustainable tourism businesses that allow them to increase the tourism product value without the number of people. So we want to keep the tourism at a sustainable level, mostly for our culture, because our people are actually endangered. We only have 1,700 people in our whole country. And if you let too many tourists in, our culture becomes suppressed. So we want to maintain the number of tourists, but increase the value of the tourism product to a natural one. And this is how we will finance it. And so we launched the Ocean Conservation Commitment recently in New York at Climate Week. And very proud to say that across the world, we have had individuals, mothers and fathers and grandparents buying an ocean conservation commitment for their children as a contribution to protecting some of these wonderful ocean spaces left in the world. And that, for me, is a democratization of investing in the types of nature that we should value and not expect a financial return, but be happy that this is a return on clean oxygen and a safe ocean and a stable climate into the future. And so I've got 2 colleagues here who are from WHOI, who've come all the way from WHOI, and they're holding up a certificate of ocean conservation commitments that our government bought. So they bought 1 ocean conservation commitment for every man, woman, and child who lives in WHOI. And that is more than the money in value, right? It's a commitment from our government that they will maintain the law and compliance strategy around this protection for at least 20 years. And that, I think, is a really special way of raising the money, but also getting the support from everyone to continue that effort into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Coral. That's beautiful. I really appreciate what you said about people are endangered as well. And I think often when we think about conservation, we think about, obviously the species and the ecosystems, but the importance of preserving and conserving culture is critical to this. So thank you. And hopefully we'll have time for questions at the end as well. So Bosco, the next question is for you. Can't see you. I was wondering if you could provide an example of a community-based resilient solution you've worked on that has helped communities in Kenya be better prepared to adapt to climate change.
Thank you very much. I've been brought up living in the mangrove ecosystem, and my swimming area has been the mangrove ponds. And growing up, I used to see our communities engaging in the conservation programs, a little bit with the fishing activities that used to go on. And for those who don't know, I come from Kenya in Africa, and nature was there before people and then people. In Kenya, Africa has 70% youth, and it's known that by 2050, Africa will be having more youths than Asia and China. Back to our Kenyan coastal ecosystem, the mangroves where I live is in an island known as Mombasa. Mombasa is a very small island, but highly populated with 1.3 million people, and 33% of those are youths of below 30 years who are not employed. So in my growing up line, I was among those youths, living and trying to understand how to survive in these murky areas. And then I started to engage in conservation space. In the coastal Kenya, most of the 1.2 people we are talking about in the Mombasa Island are people who are not the local inhabitants. So we who grew up in that ecosystem have seen the changes in culture and behavior in terms of conservation that I used to see when I was growing up. And then is how I started an organization known as Big Ship, community-based organization, to work in conserving this ecosystem. But as a youth, much of my colleagues were not into the language of conserving the mangrove, and we started doing a little bit of conservation. By 2009, Kenya had lost 70% of its mangrove ecosystem, and in the coastal strip of Kenya, the coastal zone has mangrove, it has corals, we have a lot of blue carbon programs, and even the tropical forest. Now, by 2014, we were looking at an ecosystem that was highly threatened, and people were doing planting of trees as we know it, but without any system of sustainability. So we came with a program known as Adopt a Site. We mapped the degraded ecosystems, the degraded mangrove ecosystem, using the geographical information system, did ground truthing, and look for partners to support in our conservation program. This is a long-term program that we are doing with an intention of sustainability in mind, because one time when I was working in the village, as an enthusiast restoration program person, I went into a household to convince one of the community members to participate in a tree planting. And then I saw a conflict. Of course, women are very naturally environmentalistic. And I was talking to one of the household, and the husband was there. And the conflict was, the husband was like, why do you plant trees and there is no income out of it? And I was trying to see how can I convince the man to let the woman to join other community members in a tree planting. And that's where it hit me, that my passion in planting trees needs to be tagged with something that can bring value to the households. And that's how the Adopt a Site program was now coined to ensure that we don't just plant tree, but in every tree that we plant, we tag it with a sustainability program. So one of the programs that we are doing in sustainability of the conservation, we went to the beekeeping. We took the man and told him, the tree that we plant, that one tree, because we are doing at $1 per tree, that's what we used to do, is to support beekeeping, natural tourism programs, and also bring circularity into their farming programs. Because with the incoming of, I've told you that 1.2 million in a peri-urban forest in a small small city, it means majority of those are an influx of people who are coming for employment and development, which is rapidly happening in Kenya currently. But the local indigenous community, they are traditional fishermen villages. They cannot keep up with that growing population. So how then can we convince them into the value of the same existing ecosystem? And that involved us to ensure that we bring them into sustainable tourism, the small farming in their neighborhood, in their house, how can they make it a smart agriculture? So we integrated beekeeping into our programs, and to ensure there is value in beekeeping, we came with the honey brand. In Swahili, in the local language, you call it asalim kok or mangrove honey. It's a high-value honey, and we wanted to ensure that we sell it at a premium to the community so that the man can see the value in planting the tree. In the tourism space, we opened up our mangrove ecosystem with boardwalks, and that's what we are doing now. We are setting up a 1-kilometer boardwalk within the mangrove space. And this is to open up the tourism opportunities to come and see the value within that ecosystem, and again, to support that very same households. Thirdly, in our small island and a lot of people in it, waste management is cutting across all that. So we train the community again into circular economy programs on how can we be able to stop waste from the source and make income out of it. I'm talking from the youth perspective because this is a community that I know and have grown up. And I've seen the challenges that young people are getting within that ecosystem with the transition from rural to urban setup. How can a young person whom has grown up seeing farming and fishing as the local base of income now tap into the new population that is coming with waste management? So I've been training this community on waste management and how they can create value through circularity. And in the households, we are depending on rain for our agriculture. So with the community, we are training them on scenario planning to be able to focus and see how they can look at the changing weather condition. In the last 2 weeks, we have been facing El Nino in Kenya. We have 2 seasons, 2 rain seasons. It's now the short rain season, but the rains that we are getting, I haven't seen that kind of rain before. So that is affecting our farmers. Before then, how can we create scenario planning? Lastly, as a conservationist, and bringing value to the community to see the importance of restoration from the household I mentioned. How can they see sustainability in our restoration? We did that through a specific monitoring, reporting, and verification of our restoration planting programs. Because we plant trees and then nobody takes care of them. So we are training the young people on how they can monitor the little and single trees, each tree that they plant using geographical information system. And this is very important in our restoration space. And we are looking forward and looking for partners to be able to train the entire Western Indian Ocean region on just monitoring, reporting, and verification of restoration of mangrove ecosystem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bosco. Really a big ship to fill in with all those different activities. Thank you so much. And this is a great example of some of the ability to adapt, the ability to react to those external threats as they show up, and really an example of the locally led ideas that we need to enhance and support. So I'm going to do a little pause in the panel. I'd like to introduce some remarks from Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, King's Counsel, Secretary General of the Commonwealth. She leads the Commonwealth delegation here at COP, and as part of the Blue Charter and different activities, being really leading in this space around climate change in our coastal countries. So, Secretary General, thank you.
Distinguished guests, partners, colleagues and friends, can I firstly congratulate you all for being here, having found the Nature Positive Pavilion and having upped your steps. So this is going to do nature a powerful amount of good. And I apologize, but I promise you I ran here as fast as I could. So if I start to gasp, you'll know that the oxygen coming from our oceans is doing its job, because every second breath I'm taking, I pay tribute to nature and the oceans for allowing me to take it. But it's a real pleasure to be able to join you today, because this Nature Positive Pavilion is a really powerful opportunity for us to have what is a vital conversation. And I'm so sorry that I have interrupted the panel and haven't had the opportunity to hear the great things that have been said. But may I start by thanking you. I want to thank Dr. Anna Spalding, because she has done a remarkable amount of work, and the work that the Smithsonian Institute is doing, especially through her leadership of the community-based resilient solutions and the initiative, it's remarkable and really much needed. So resilience is a priority for humanity, especially our most vulnerable places. And it's the watchword of the Commonwealth. Indeed, our Commonwealth family will gather together in Samoa. It's in October of next year. In the vastness of the beauty of the Pacific. So next year will be our next heads of government meeting under the banner, One Resilient Common Future. And our Commonwealth of 2.5 billion people and 56 nations spread across 5 continents and all the great ocean basins is an ocean Commonwealth. 49 Commonwealth countries border the ocean. Our member states are stewards of more than 1/3 of the global ocean under national jurisdiction. Nearly half of all coral reefs and 1/3 of all mangroves are in our Commonwealth. And 2/3 of the world's small island developing states are in the Commonwealth. We have 25 small island states in the Indian Ocean, the Caribbean, and in the Pacific. And there can be no healthy planet without a healthy ocean. And there can be no healthy ocean without recognizing that coastal communities are our real blue leaders, with the knowledge and the understanding and the commitment to support their regions and fight against climate change. Our indigenous people in particular have been the guardians of nature, the guardians of the oceans for millennia. And unlike many of us, they have never departed from that responsibility. They've kept our oceans safe. This spirit runs through the Commonwealth Blue Charter, which brings our member countries together in active cooperation to solve ocean-related challenges and meet the commitments of the Sustainable Ocean Action. So across all of our 16 Blue Charter action groups, from coral reef protection and mangroves to the sustainable blue economy and coastal fisheries, the expertise and experience of coastal communities is central to everything we do and all of our efforts, and encouraging the engagement of women, youth, LGBTI, indigenous people, local communities is a specific aim of our Blue Charter project incubator. And I know that today's event will spotlight some of the incredible work each of you is doing to emphasize the essential synergy between effective and equitable governance and the value of inclusive science and the importance of community leadership as a key driver for lasting change. Now, in all of this, I share your commitment to partnership across different disciplines to ensure that the action we take together is both comprehensive and collective, laying down the foundations for a more equitable and climate-resilient future for people and nature. We share the privilege of working together, but that gives us a profound responsibility. And I want you to know that the Commonwealth is with you, and we are also counting on you. We need your passion, we need your acuity, we need your judgment, we need your knowledge, and we rejoice that you are willing to be partners with us. The fact that the Commonwealth represents 1/3 of the world is really important, because within our family we have everyone, We have big nations, small nations, rich nations, poor nations, island states, landlocked states. And together we understand that if we come together in partnership, all of us, then we will be able to turn the tide, and we will be able to save our world. So when I say thank you to you, I'm not just thanking you for me. I'm thanking you for the 2.5 billion people I represent, but I'm thanking you for the next generation who are relying on us to do the right thing. I think it's been said before, but we are the first generation to really suffer the aberrant consequences of climate change. And we could all say we didn't contribute to getting us here, but we are here. And we are the last generation to be able to do anything about it, to stop the clock and to turn it back. Because each of us is more than a representative of an organization, an institution, or a nation. We are all individually custodians of the most magnificent and life-sustaining source on our planet, our ocean. It has fed us, it has given us the very air to breathe, and if we don't save it, it will no longer be able to save us. So from the bottom of my heart, I'm saying thank you to each and every one of you for all you've already done, for all you are doing now, but most importantly, for all you will do as a result of coming together that you would not have done had you not partnered. And on those days when you're wondering, why on earth am I doing this? I'm tired, I'm weary, I am about to give up because nobody's listening. Can you please remember that the Secretary General, on behalf of 2.5 billion people, said we are listening, we are grateful, and most importantly, you can do this. We can do this. So let's save our planet because it loves us, and trust me, we love it. So bless you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Secretary General. Appreciate it. I know you have to run to the next event. I will maybe try to find you at some other event, but thank you. I appreciate it. This is no better way to represent what we mean by tropical majority. Obviously, the importance and value, as we've been hearing from our panelists, about working together and about valuing the contributions of both nature and people differently. So that's something to think about. So we'll continue with back to our regular programming. The next section definitely speaks to how we understand our ocean and our communities and our people that live in these coastal communities and the resources that are within those. So the next section is on science for resilient coastal ecosystems. And I'm going to start, Rumana, with you. How can resilient science help inform policies for conservation and for climate change adaptation? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, for a very timely and important question for us, particularly who have been working on building climate resilience and linking our research to policies. So I'd like to start with an example from coastal regions of Bangladesh. You all may know that Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world for climate change, and mainly due to its geographical position and also environmental setting. We have the Bay of Bengal at one side and Himalayan region on the other side. So we have been facing the issues of sea level rise and large-scale climate variabilities. And if you zoom into Bangladesh and try to find out who are the vulnerable communities, you will find that the the coastlines and coastal regions are most vulnerable, and most of the vulnerable communities are fishers and small-scale aquaculture farmers. So they are most vulnerable because they have been relying on the natural resources, and also their low adaptive capacity. And they have been suffering from a range of issues. For example, temperature variations, rainfall variations, tidal surges, flooding, cyclones, salinization. So I don't know if there is anything left. So they have been facing all through these issues. And what we have been doing, that we have been working on context-specific adaptation measures to build their resilience, climate resilience capacity, and based on our research outputs, we are also trying to inform the policies so that the policies can be formed in a climate-informed way, you know. So if I give an example from our coastal region, we have been working on a number of adaptation measures, and I'd like to mention 2, 3, and because we have been working with Department of Fisheries very recently to revise the National Fisheries Policy, and so that we can have our science inputs to that policy revision. So first of all, I'd like to mention the climate risk management, how we have been managing climate risks for small-scale fishers and aquaculture farmers. So our hypothesis was that if we can provide them climate risk information in advance to that specific event, so that they can adapt themselves, they can manage the decisions how they will be managing those risks. So that is one, and we are providing them very local specific, context specific information and services so that they can make climate informed decisions. And another one is community-based fisheries management. So we are also working with the small-scale fisheries communities for conservation, and also not only conservation of natural resources, also to secure their livelihood, to ensure their food and nutrition security as well. And the third one, I would say that, as I was saying, the vulnerable communities, I mentioned the fishers and fish farmers in the coastal regions. But what we have found that there have been community who have been working on salt farming. So what we did, we also introducing integrated farming for them, because salt farming is a very seasonal activity. So we introduced Artemia and integrated aquaculture and salt farming so that they can produce food and also sustain their livelihoods over the year. So these three, actually, we have been working with Department of Fisheries to revise the policy revision process, and we arranged a number of policy dialogues, and the research, we presented the research results stemming from our research to the audience, and we have received really very important inputs from them, which we have compiled, and we have developed a policy brief very recently, which we'll be publishing very soon, and we'll hand over to Fisheries Department and relevant government authorities, so that our research and our ongoing works inform the recent policy revision. So this is how actually we have been doing the research for the vulnerable communities to build their climate resilient capacity, and also at the same time to inform the policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Romana. Really important here how this research is really use-inspired. So I think when we talk about the research that we do, thinking about basic science, engaged science, applied science, we're calling it use-inspired science, where the science that we're generating is for the benefit of the communities that most need it. So thank you. And then the next question is near and dear to my heart as a social scientist. Not priming you at all, Yoshina, but are there some changes in how we do science that you would like to see implemented? And can you give us some examples? Thank you.
Definitely. I would say mainstreaming the idea of a social ocean is something that I see as absolutely critical. I think in my very short career, I've seen so many ways in which integrating social perspectives, especially in the tropics, really is a game changer. And it's an idea that is not well integrated enough, and there's so much work left to be done. I was trained myself as a tropical ecologist, natural sciences, and my first job was managing a local NGO around the marine park. And my very first project was a Jeff Small Grants project to introduce national octopus fisheries closure. And it involved interacting a lot with small-scale fishers. And that's when, you know, the instant you start doing such work, you're humbled down because you just realize how limited your knowledge is and how much work there is to do to really integrate so many knowledge sources to really come to effective and equitable solutions, something we keep using as our tagline, but to really be nature positive, people positive, there's a lot of work that needs to be done and a lot of training that needs to happen in the tropics to even mainstream the idea of social ocean. So after being trained in my PhD in social ecological systems, there's various initiatives I was engaged in the Western Indian Ocean, mainly in Mauritius, my home country. So I started working on understanding how coastal communities are integrated in marine protected area management, understanding adaptive management plans and seeing how that's happening on different island nations within the same country. And it was so interesting to see how even within such a small nation, people's connection to the ocean is different. And there is so much focus on indigenous communities' connection to the ocean. But in countries like Mauritius, where the current population has been shaped by multiple waves of colonization, people who mostly came from inland areas of continental regions, there is not that natural connection to the sea. And of course, that affects how contemporary natural resource management happens. So as we now talk about 30 by 30, it's very important to understand what people's connection to nature is, how that affects compliance, because this will have an impact on our management systems and how much we are able to protect effectively. So that's definitely one component. And when I did this research, we did like thousands of surveys actually, and it involved engaging a lot with local students, marine science students who was again trained in natural sciences, did not have a social science component. So this was a very enjoyable part of the work for me, being able to engage from an institution like Stanford and bringing that knowledge back to my home country. And it became such a game changer when in 2020, while we were dealing with the impacts of the pandemic, and an oil spill happened along a very important coastline where we had a lot of marine protected areas. It was the worst ecological disaster the island had faced, and of course there was so much focus on the oil spill response and on protecting the coral reef and the shoreline. But what we were missing was the fact that this was also an area where we had vulnerable small-scale fishing communities, people who had already lost their jobs to tourism and had naturally turned to the sea for subsistence, and now we were taking that away from them. So I happened to be there, and we were able to bring back this group of students I had worked with before to study the impacts that the oil spill and COVID had and how to better design recovery efforts. During these initiatives, we saw how women were disproportionately affected because they are mostly part of the informal economy, engaged in gleaning activities. So from this social impact assessment that we did, we were able to better center the efforts that, for example, UNDP and other United Nations agencies were doing. But in the process, a lot of the people we had trained before were able to help support this initiative. So that was such a powerful moment and really showed how more social ecological research is so important, especially in the tropics. When we dealt with the pandemic, we could not have scientists from the global north flocking into the island. So that's when you realize why local capacity is so important. One other initiative that worked really well in Mauritius was a citizen science initiative we did with Wildlife Conservation Society from Kenya. And in that process, we were able to do the first national mapping of coral and fish endemics in Mauritius to see the trends and what species were being extinct. And this involved engagement with dive centers, with local government agencies, where we eventually were able to map the endemics around the island. And the social studies I did, we were able to see how even within such a small context, people's willingness to protect and be stewards of the marine environment differed from area to area. So it helps us map where the most endangered species are and where people are most willing to protect. And that really helps guide governance and policy decisions. So it's really important that these are not like ad hoc studies that we do, that we end up valuing more of these social ecological studies, how they intersect and how they can be a game changer for policy. So definitely I would say more social ecological research, more knowledge about how it makes our policies better and makes conservation better. Thank you.
Brilliant. I agree. Thank you. It's definitely an example of how sort of, you know, we saw the first two examples when we're talking about strategies and actions that are community-based, and through the science, both we can generate the knowledge that we need to make decisions, as well as include the communities as part of that science. So that speaks to that valuing, not just thinking about ecosystems and community and natural resources. And so we have one more speaker, and then someone's going to close our session. So I'd like to invite Alfredo, who's going to speak about just transition. So this is a little bit more on the how, and maybe thinking about some of the structural ways in which you can engage with businesses and business partners to implement some of these ideas. So Alfredo, a question for you is, what is the potential of ocean innovators or startups to achieve a more sustainable and resilient future? And how can we support a just transition lens that recognizes the potential impacts, or not the potential, the impacts, the disproportionate impacts of climate change on vulnerable communities? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very honored to be with all of you. You have done amazing work. Your story in New York almost made me cry, and this is the second time I hear it, and I still feel the same, so thank you so much. Before I go into the startups portion, I want to talk about the role of the private sector. And let me start this with a figure. In 2018, 100 companies represented 60% of the total revenues generated from the ocean. 100 companies, 60%. What does this mean? We are here in a panel talking about equity, talking about a just transition, and we are talking about 100 companies represented 60% of the total revenues. And that's nothing to say against them in particular, but it's something to say about the responsibility that they have to people, to nature, and to climate. And I think this is something that we should recognize. So at the World Economic Forum, we are the organization for public-private collaboration, and what we try to do is, how do we bring in those corporates into conversations with governments, with civil society, and with scientists, so that they understand how that responsibility translates into concrete actions. And we do it in 3 ways. Number 1 is, how are you going to transform the way in which you act in your own operations? That's the first question that we always ask. The second question is, how are you going to invest in nature? And the third question that we ask in the Ocean program is, how are you going to nurture innovation? And the cross-cutting theme across all of these, well, there's 2 cross-cutting themes. One is everything needs money, so we need to talk about money. But the second thing that we are pushing a lot is everything affects people. And you need to think about how you are getting people included in your strategies and in your planning for each of these things. So I'll go very quickly through the 3. How do you invest in your operations? We hear a lot about net zero targets. We hear a lot about nature positive targets. What does that actually mean? Do we have metrics? Do we know what is it to be nature positive for a company that is shipping, for example? Like, they only need the water. Like, what else do they need to care for the ocean? And the reality is that, well, that might be true that they just need water to navigate, but at the same time, they have such a disproportionate impact through ballast waters, through other types of waste that they are generating, through invasive species, through oil spills, that we cannot ignore that responsibility. Even further, we have seen a lot in the news things related to, unfortunately, human right abuses at sea. We have seen a lot of news regarding how sometimes it's not only about whether you are forced or not to be there, but just about the conditions themselves. And I think they have a huge responsibility to make sure that as they think about these net zero targets that we are talking about here, they don't forget about the people. And this is something that we are emphasizing every time we can. The second thing is, how do you invest in nature? And I think that the golden mine that we are seeing everywhere, and that we have, probably all of you have heard at least 10 panels talking about this, is nature-based solutions. How are you going to plant mangroves? How are you going to restore seagrasses? How are you going to, and this is why I am also so honored to be here with you, because I think that you take a people-centric approach. And this is not only about taking the money into the community and dropping it, planting some trees, and then going away and claiming the carbon credits. This is about how do we go in and do responsible investments that actually foster a more healthy, a resilient community. And I think that the problem here that we are facing right now is that there's a rush. There's a rush for companies to want to invest in this. Sometimes thinking of the promise of carbon credits, we know, particularly in the blue carbon space, that this is not yet realized. This is not a benefit that is realized yet. There's a lot of very smart people talking and working on it, but we are not there yet. But what we know is that these ecosystems already provide coastal infrastructure services like coastal protection, like livelihoods, like fisheries. That we already know. And the smart companies are already starting to invest in these ocean-based, nature-based solutions for those reasons, and thinking of the carbon as a co-benefit, not necessarily as a primate benefit. And then the third point is on ocean innovation, and I think we are almost out of time, so I'll do it very quickly, is how do we foster innovation that is actually inclusive? And sorry, I have to look at my notes for this one because I don't want to miss any of them. We host a partnership. It's 37 members that we have the honor to host, called the 1,000 Ocean Startups. Our goal is very simple. How do we get to 1,000 ocean startups that are creating nature and people positive impacts by 2030? And how do we unlock $5 billion of finance that go into those solutions? And so when you think about what is the goal of this for people, it is, number one, how do we get it into the tropical majority places? Like, we cannot just pretend that the startups in the global north are going to solve every problem. Number two, how do we provide safety net and de-risking mechanisms for those markets that are a little more difficult? Number three, how do we help, especially those communities, to test in the field? This is expensive, and there's a lot of support out there that we can connect. And number four, how do we get universities to contribute to this and develop that capacity? So precisely on that last one, and my last note for today, I am very honored to partner here with Anna and the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. The World Economic Forum and STRI are partnering to launch a Hoffman Fellowship, which is a postdoctoral scholar that will be completely focused on how ocean innovation can also be just and supporting that transition for the three pillars that we were talking about. So thank you very much, Anna, for that partnership, and really looking forward to that.
Thank you, Alfredo, for sharing that news. There's some things in the background working to make sure that's happening, but we're really excited to launch that fellowship, and hopefully it'll be another pathway for engaging the tropical majority, tropical expertise in this kind of work. So I'd like to wrap up, I'd like to invite Dr. Ellen Stofan, who's the Undersecretary of Science and Research for the Smithsonian. And is the real champion for life on a sustainable planet, the reason that we're here, the head of our delegation, and is really supportive of this environmental justice, interdisciplinary research, and really changing how an institution like the Smithsonian can support all the great initiatives that we've heard about today. Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you all for being here today. This was incredibly inspiring. Each one of you that spoke today, to me, we have an effort at the Smithsonian called Earth Optimism, and sometimes it is really hard to be optimistic when we look at all the challenges that we're facing. But I think each of you really brought a different aspect of how, by working with communities locally, by understanding what the issues are, what the challenges are, we can really make significant change. I think the pressure that we're all feeling is, how do we take this to scale? How do we get more communities involved? How do we get more solutions out there. And that's why we're so excited about this resilience initiative at the Smithsonian, where hopefully we can take a lot of these solutions and get more eyes on them and get them expanded outward. We have a big initiative that we launched at COP last year called Life on a Sustainable Planet. And a big part of it is around the oceans, around reef resilience, around sustainable urban estuaries, around blue carbon. And these are the kind of solutions that we absolutely need in order to really have resilient communities. But one of the things that Anna has so much brought to the Smithsonian, and that I think we heard over and over and again today by the panel, we're talking about people. We're talking about building resilient community solutions to protect nature and protect the planet. If we don't make people successful, we will fail at everything. And if we don't involve people in developing the initial solutions, we're also going to fail. And so these are the kind of efforts that you've heard highlighted here today that I think are really going to make a difference. So Anna, thank you very much, and thank you so much to our panelists today for putting all this together. Anna, I don't know if we have time for questions. Okay.
There's a chair. All right, thank you. So we have a few minutes for questions. Thank you, Ellen, so much. It's been a real pleasure to work with an institution that, well, I was always at an institution that supported, but it's really exciting to see the breadth of the Smithsonian and how we can really engage in these spaces. And especially excited to continue working with this panelist. If it were up to me, I think I would just take over the rest of COP and sit here and chat with all of you and learn about all the things you're doing. It's really, really excited. I do want to say one thing. This is just the beginning of this idea of engaging the tropical majority. This started with a paper that we published earlier this year. And as you can see, we're all representatives from the tropics. I'm from Panama. We've got Mexico, Bangladesh, Niue, Kenya, Mauritius, Mexico. We covered the region, and we invite more people from the region to also be part of this. We will be putting together some sort of statement or some commitment with these kinds of examples that we'll probably post on the Resilience website. And again, hope to continue working with this group as well as with anybody that's interested in really thinking about how to leverage and build out. So I want to open it up for questions if anyone has any questions for the panelists.
Gracias, en español. Bueno, han estado hablando de la ciencia, cómo se aplica en las comunidades, cómo logramos hacer todo este tema para que haya territorios más saludables para desarrollar las actividades tanto pesqueras como turísticas, ¿cierto? Sin embargo, yo creería que la ciencia es importante, sí, es muy cierto, pero deberíamos de tener comunidades que ejerzan la gobernanza en el territorio y que puedan ellas decidir cuál es el futuro que ellas quieren para su territorio. Si los gobiernos fueran más, digamos, consecuentes con las comunidades, entonces tendríamos ecosistemas más saludables, tendríamos ecosistemas mucho más activos y que generaran la biodiversidad que se debería tener. Pero desafortunadamente los gobiernos deciden por las comunidades y es allí donde está el error. Si nos preguntaran a nosotros como comunidad pesquera, yo soy pescador artesanal, si nos preguntaran a nosotros cómo quisiéramos el territorio, de seguro no tuviéramos la degradación que tenemos en los territorios. Yo vengo del Golfo Morrosquillo en Colombia y sé y estamos sufriendo las consecuencias de la industria, del turismo y de la mala planificación. Entonces, si dejaran que los nativos ejercieran la gobernanza en el territorio, la ciencia solamente llegara a estudiar lo bonito que es el territorio. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias por su intervención. I'm going to translate this. So the comment was about, yes, we need the science, and yes, we need this knowledge, but that mainly we also need the governance structures to change, that a lot of times governments impose ways in which we understand this, and don't really take into account the local community perspectives about what we want that community to look like and how we want that engagement to look like. And so I'm going to answer it first in English, and then I'll respond. Le voy a responder en español un momentito, voy a responder en inglés. Sí, ok. Bueno, igual me gustaría responder en español, pero Colombia, en vecinos. So I guess the answer to that as a comment is that part of this initiative, the goal is to, when we talk about resilient outcomes, to make sure that those outcomes are driven by what people want to be as opposed to these imposed. And that, again, is a core piece of this idea of the tropical majority, where we're leveraging the communities themselves and their knowledge and their expertise and centering that knowledge and that expertise within the ocean governance. So muchas gracias por su intervención. And also feel free to ask other panelists. I don't have to answer. Yes.
I just have an observation based on Joshina's presentation. I'm Sebastian Anton Rodriguez from India. It's amazing that she, being a marine scientist from natural sciences, has engaged with the society into realm of social sciences. In fact, my experience has been opposite. I'm from social sciences and I've been engaging with natural sciences, because both are important when you deal with the field, because categorization into social science and natural science is no longer relevant. We need to bridge these gaps, and we need to bridge this gap very quickly. And also John Bosco's presentation about his ideas about engaging with citizen science is also very important. We need to break the boundaries between academics, within academics, and also between academics and the society. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say there's so much effort we need to do in that direction, make sure that academics are just not talking to each other, or even social scientists are just not talking to each other. I think my first cup last year, my only little critical comment was just felt like we're all on these panels just patting each other on the back. And there's so much more that we need to do to be out there and communicate in non-academic language to society, as you said. And within academia itself, there's so much more that needs to be done to support people who are trying to do that, because this is something that a lot of scientists do in their own time. It's something that is not acknowledged, not always appreciated, and that a lot of us are doing just because we recognize the value. And I think the more we are trying to think about effective and equitable solutions and being people positive, I think this also needs to be appreciated better. So thank you for this comment.
We have one more comment.
No, I have to leave.
I wanted to just quick comment on what he has just mentioned. The integration between social science, marine science, and I want to add the other one, and politicians or governance. What my colleague was just mentioning, how to bring the governance system into the space. Most of the time you realize, as you have just said, scientists, especially marine scientists, basically all researchers, they are very much enthusiastic and focused on research, but taking it out there is very critical. I stand in the middle of all those ecosystems to ensure that what happens in the research can be pushed into the politicians for implementation. Thank you.
Sorry. You want to? So I'll just add a brief comment to that. When I was doing my PhD, I had the luck that I had so I am a marine scientist, and I had the luck that I had a good friend who was a marine anthropologist. And we realized that we were studying exactly the same communities at the same time. So both of our theses ended up complementing each other. But you are absolutely right. The next step was, how do we connect that to policy? How do we bring in the newspapers, the journalists, et cetera, or the communication machinery to start making that happen? And that is why I'm also so excited to be partnering with STRI. STRI is a very prominent academic institution, and the forum can offer the platform for them to learn how to connect the dots. So this is why I am really excited about this partnership.
Thank you. Very briefly, so I'm a scientist as well, but I'm a fisherman's daughter first. And so I think it's really important that we understand the people who live and your eyes on the water and the stories that you're told from your forefathers is the most accurate science and information that we have. It's just not recognized as a PhD. It is knowledge and experience that no one else in the world can buy from an institution. And so we have to elevate people with that knowledge and make them feel an important part at the table. And at the moment, in our region, if you don't have a an education, a formal education, or a fancy title in front of your name, you often are not engaged meaningfully in the process. And these are the champions of positive management of resources that we need to bring to the table to inform practical policy. Because the best fancy policy in the world and all science is not going to mean anything if it's not proven to actually work. And we have thousands of people who know what they're doing. We just have to give them a meaningful seat at the table. Thank you.
You want one?
Hola, soy Pamela, soy de la Patagonia chilena y represento unas áreas de pueblos originarios marinas. Yo creo que no hay divisiones entre pueblos originarios y la ciencia. Yo creo que lo que más necesitamos es unirnos y yo creo que lo que más quieren los pueblos originarios son datos. Datos de la ciencia mezclados con la sabiduría ancestral. Son un respaldo importante para los pueblos originarios la ciencia para poder validar muchas cosas, incluso que sí se validan con los pueblos originarios, pero necesitamos la ciencia. Lo que sí yo sumaría de que cuando la ciencia va a los territorios a buscar información, la devuelva a los territorios. Sí a los políticos y eso, pero al territorio muchas veces la ciencia no devuelve la información. Así también los antropólogos, cuando van a buscar información, pidan la autorización a las comunidades, porque muchas veces hasta se llevan restos, entonces tiene que haber una comunicación y tiene que hacerse la ciencia en base al respeto a los territorios, pero no hay una división. Yo creo que entre los pueblos y la ciencia no hay una división, lo que tiene que haber es respeto y devolver esa información a los territorios, a los ciudadanos, a las comunidades pequeñas, también a los gobiernos, pero sin olvidarse de devolver la información que recolectan. Eso, más que nada.
Sí, muchísimas gracias. The importance of devolving, returning the information back to the communities when we work with them. Okay, so I want to close this. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you to the wonderful panelists. Hopefully we have time for a quick picture before we leave. And thank you all for the audience for being here. Appreciate it. Have a great COP.